Hey guys, what's going on? It's Phil here from TechSmart, and today we're going to be doing a massive comparison. We're going to be comparing the LG G3 to the Galaxy S5, HTC One M8, Galaxy Note 3, iPhone 5s, and the LG G2. So let's go ahead and see how the G3 stacks up. Starting off, we're going to look at the LG G3. So on the front, we have a 5.5-inch display, front-facing camera, and your LG logo. Nothing on the right or left, but on the top of the device, you have your IR blaster, and on this Korean model, we have an antenna. On the bottom, you have a 3.5mm headphone jack and your micro USB charging port. Flipping the device over to the back, you have a 13-megapixel camera, sleep-wake button, as well as your volume rocker. On the Samsung Galaxy S5, on the front, we have a 5.1-inch display, your front-facing camera, you're going to have a capacitive multitask and back button, and you're also going to have that fingerprint home button. And looking over to the right of the device, you have a sleep-wake button. Flipping over to the left, you're going to have a volume rocker. Right on top, you have your IR blaster and 3.5mm headphone jack. On the bottom, you have a micro USB 3.0 charging port. You're also going to have that flap, and that's going to cover to keep some water out. On the back of the device, you have a 16-megapixel camera and your heart rate monitor. Looking at the HTC One M8, on the front, you have a 5-inch display. You're going to have your front-facing camera and your dual boom sound speakers. On the right of the device, you have your SD card slot and your volume rockers. On the left of the device, you have your SIM card slot. And looking at the top of the device, you have your IR blaster and sleep-wake button. On the bottom of the device, you have your micro USB charging port, 3.5mm headphone jack. And on the back, you have your 4 ultra-pixel camera, duo camera, dual LED, and some branding. Now taking a look at the Galaxy Note 3, you have a 5.7-inch display, your front-facing camera, home button, capacitive menu, and back key. On the right of the device, you have your sleep-wake button. On the left, you have your volume rocker. Right up top, you have an IR blaster and 3.5mm headphone jack. On the bottom, you have a micro USB 3.0 charging port, as well as a slot for your S Pen. Flipping the device over to the back, you have your 13-megapixel camera, your leatherette backing, and a flash. Looking over to the iPhone 5s, you have a 4-inch display with your front-facing camera, as well as your home button, which doubles as the fingerprint scanner. On the right-hand side, you have a SIM card slot, and on the left-hand side, you have your mute switch and volume rocker. Right up top, you're going to have your sleep-wake button as well. Now, along the bottom, you have a 3.5mm headphone jack, lightning charger, speaker, and microphone. Flipping the iPhone over to the back, you have an 8-megapixel camera and a dual LED flash. Looking at the LG G2, you have a 5.2-inch display with a front-facing camera, nothing on the right or left. Right up top, you're going to have an IR blaster. Along the bottom, you have a speaker, micro USB charging port, and your 3.5mm headphone jack. Flipping the device over to the back, you have a 13-megapixel camera with your flash, volume rocker, and your sleep-wake key. So let's take a look at some of the specifications on these devices so we can see what we're working with. On the LG G3, you have a 5.5-inch display with a resolution of 2560 by 1440. That has a PPI clocked in at 538. You're going to have a Snapdragon 801 processor clocked at 2.5 GHz. It's quad-core. You're going to have an Adreno 330 GPU, 3 GB of RAM, a 13-megapixel camera with 4K video, a 3000 mAh battery, a micro SD card slot available up to 128 GB, and you're also going to have that new laser autofocus feature. On the Samsung Galaxy S5, you're going to get a 5.1-inch display with a 1080p resolution. That's going to give you a PPI of 432. You're going to have a Snapdragon 801 processor, the same one from the LG G3. It's quad-core clocked at 2.5 GHz, the Adreno 330 graphics, 2 GB of RAM, a 16-megapixel camera with 4K video. You're also going to have a 2800 mAh battery. You're also going to have a micro SD available up to 128 GB. Now with the S5, you're also going to get IP67 certification, as well as a fingerprint scanner built into the home button. Now looking at the HTC One M8, you're going to get that 5-inch display with a resolution of 1920 by 1080. It's going to clock in at 441 pixels per inch. Snapdragon 801 processor, it's quad-core clocked at 2.3 GHz. You're going to have the Adreno 330 graphics, 2 GB of RAM, a 4 ultra-pixel camera, 2600 mAh battery, up to 128 GB available for a micro SD, And you're also going to have that full aluminum construction, which is really nice to have. On the Samsung Galaxy Note 3, you're going to have a 5.7-inch display with a resolution of 1920 by 1080. It's going to give it a PPI of 386, Snapdragon 800 processor clocked at 2.3 GHz, the Adreno 330 graphics, 3 GB of RAM, a 13 megapixel camera with 4K video recording, a massive 3200 mAh battery, as well as up to 64 GB available for a micro SD card. You're also going to have that S Pen, which is mounted in the bottom of the device. Now, looking at the iPhone, you get a 4-inch display with a resolution of 1136 by 640. It's only going to give it a PPI of 326. As far as the processor, you get the Apple A7 64-bit processor. It's dual-core clocked at 2.26 GHz. You're going to have the PowerVR G6430 graphics, 1 GB of RAM, an 8 megapixel camera, a 1570 mAh battery. Unfortunately, there's no micro SD card slot available, but you do get that fingerprint scanner in the home button. Lastly, looking at the LG G3, you have a 5.2-inch display, 1080p resolution display with a 423 pixels per inch count, Snapdragon 800 processor clocked at 2.26 GHz, the Adreno 330 graphics, 2 GB of RAM, 13 megapixel camera with a 3000 mAh battery. You're not going to have a micro SD card available on this phone, but you do have those rear mounted buttons that we saw on the G3. Now, looking at the software available on all of these devices, the LG G3 is running Android 4.4 KitKat. It has LG's new graphic user interface planted on top. It looks very nice. It has a very minimal design. They're using long shadow for the icons. It's very smooth and it has some very crisp animations. The cons to this design are the system icons can easily contrast with third-party applications. There's lots of bloatware, and the UI can be inconsistent at times. You do get some pretty cool features with the software, though. You're getting knock-on, which allows you to tap the display a couple times to wake it up. You can also tap it twice from the home screen to shut it off. You have Smart Notice, which is essentially LG's companion to Google Now. What it's going to do is alert you of contacts you haven't added, weather alerts, just some of the stuff that you're not getting right within Google Now that's more so pertaining to the phone itself. And they're now adding this smart keyboard. So what they've done is they've really taken a lot of technology and implemented this into the keyboard to give you an easier typing experience, and you can also adjust the size of the keyboard. So if your hands are really large or if they're pretty small, you can adjust the height to really get the best keyboard out of this device. So the Galaxy S5 is running Android 4.4 KitKat as well. It has Samsung's TouchWiz interface planted on top, which looks decent this year. They've really done a lot of modifying to it. There's a good amount of bloatware, but it's definitely better than previous versions. The design can be a bit inconsistent, and again, it really is going to clash with Androids. But as far as the features go, you get the heart rate scanner as well as a lot of fitness applications like S-Health, which is really going to integrate deeply within the phone. You have Watch On, which is going to help you use the IR blaster for remote control. You have this My Magazine feature, which is like a flipboard application that's cooked into the operating system. And you also have that fingerprint scanner, so that's going to allow you to not only unlock the phone, but dive into applications like PayPal and any other application that use that API. Now, the HTC One M8 is also running Android 4.4 KitKat. It has HTC Sense plastered on top, which is definitely my favorite looking version of Android out there. It looks really clean, it's very minimal. The Android UI unfortunately doesn't keep up with this too much, so you'll run into areas where the HTC Sense interface kind of messes up with the Android interface and it doesn't really look that great. You have a good flipboard integration like the magazine feature on the S5, and you have a decent amount of health integration with some Fitbit applications. Now looking at the Galaxy Note 3, it's running Android 4.4 KitKat as well, which is running an older version of Samsung's TouchWiz interface. So it's simple, it works well with third-party applications, but overall it's outdated and kind of looks cartoonish. So you have these features like My Magazine, you have Air Command, which is essentially your S Pen controls. You're going to get S Note, S Memo, which are all going to work together to let you use the S Pen a little bit better. But overall, I mean, it's definitely outdated software, and I really like what we see on the S5 instead. Now, looking over to the iPhone, it's of course the only device here not running Android. It's running iOS 7, and it's a simple user interface. It has a flat UI. Overall, though, you have lack of customization. It's pretty stale, and it's definitely becoming outdated. Well, they definitely revamped the look of iOS 7 from iOS 6 in previous versions. Underneath, it's still all just the same. You do get some nice features in there. You're going to have that fingerprint scanner to unlock the device, as well as authorized iTunes purchases. And it's still true to this day that you're going to get some of the best applications on an iOS device and not available on Android. Lastly, looking at the LG G2, it's running Android 4.2 with LG's older skin on top. It's not the same skin from the G3. It matches with Android a little bit, but it's definitely outdated, and with cartoon-like weird textures, I don't really know how to feel about it. It definitely feels like older software that shouldn't be on this phone. You do get some cool features. You're getting knock-on from the G3 as well. You have Memo, but overall it's a pretty blank standard experience as far as software goes. Next up, let's look at the displays on these devices. So looking at the LG G3, you're going to have a 5.5-inch display with a resolution of 2560 by 1440. Yes, that. It has a PPI of 538, and it's an IPS LCD display. Let's just take a moment here to soak all of that in. This display is gorgeous. It's sharp, and I will go on the record to say this is the best display I have ever seen on a smartphone. Hands down. Now take note, I have not seen any of the Oppo devices, so that could kind of alter my decision, but I've seen a lot of phones out there, and this display is gorgeous. Movies, photos, anything, it pops, it looks vibrant, it looks amazing. I tend to like AMOLED displays even more. However, this display is just on point. 538 PPI is nothing to joke about. Everything is sharp, everything is crisp, and if you're going to get the LG G3, you're definitely going to fall in love with this display as I did as well. Now, looking at the Galaxy S5 and trying to keep up that standard of an amazing display, you have a 5.1-inch display with a 1080p resolution. Gives you a 432 pixels per inch, which is nice. It's definitely respectable. It's a lot better than some of the other phones out there. It's a Super AMOLED display, and like I said, I really love AMOLED displays. I love the stark contrast you get between colors, the oversaturated colors you even get sometimes. I tend to enjoy that. And it's just really nice. It does a lot to conserve battery life. Because of that AMOLED display, anything that's actually black isn't using the battery, so I really enjoy that. But overall, text is sharp, everything looks pretty nice, but next to the LG G3, it's kind of going to get blown out of the water. Looking at the HTC One M8, it's a 5-inch display, 1080p, and you're going to get 441 pixels per inch. It's an IPS LCD, and this display looks really nice. Before seeing the G3, this was definitely one of my favorite displays out there. Colors look really great, and it's just a really overall nice looking display. HTC has done a lot with their software to include typography, which really goes well with this display. Everything looks sharp, and it's really nice. Next up, we have the Samsung Galaxy Note 3. It has a 5.7-inch display with a resolution of 1920 by 1080. It's going to give it a pixels per inch of 386. This is also a Super AMOLED display. Now, the display definitely looks nice. At 386 ppi, it could really use a few more pixels. Now, the benefits with this display is that it's just so large, and it's obviously meant to be used with the S Pen. It's really more for productivity and viewing media, and it definitely delivers. I really like the size of this display. I don't usually use it on a daily basis, but I could definitely get jiggy with this phone. Next up, we have the iPhone. It has a 4-inch display, which the size does not bother me. However, the resolution does. It's 1136 by 640, and it gives it 326 pixels per inch. It's an IPS LCD, which I have no problem with that at all. Now, colors look great. Everything looks nice on this phone, but it needs a higher resolution. Now, last, we have the LG G2. It's a 5.2-inch display with a 1080p resolution. Has 423 pixels per inch, and it's an IPS LCD. Now it looks nice, however, the software uses a lot of these cartoon elements, which kind of require an AMOLED display to get the best view out of it. So because of that, it's kind of odd that they chose an IPS display for this. However, looking at photos and videos, colors do look very nice, very real life, and it's definitely a really quality display. Now displays are nice, however, let's go ahead and look at the cameras on these phones and see how they all fare. So the LG G3 has a 13 megapixel shooter, and I am definitely going to get some flack for saying this, but I think the LG G3 is the only camera that can truly rival the iPhones. Laser autofocus is amazing, and the quality is without a doubt great. I was talking to Keaton earlier before doing this video, and basically this camera it's really something else. LG has without a doubt flew out of the water with this phone. They have done a lot of awesome stuff, and the camera is one of the main features that I definitely love. If you don't know, I do a lot of the videos on this channel, so I'm a photographer myself. I do video all the time, so having a really nice camera in a phone, that's really important, and this phone definitely delivers. You also get 4K video, which looks nice, but it can be a bit shaky. There's no stabilization in there for that. Now, the Samsung Galaxy S5 has a 16 megapixel camera, which is really nice. I mean, more megapixels is just going to give you a larger photo, so that's always nice if you're wanting to crop in on anything. Now, the photos definitely look great, hands down. I'm not saying that the LG G3 necessarily takes better photos, but the Galaxy S5 takes a little bit too long to get a good photo out of it. There's no optical image stabilization, so you can't just point and shoot. You have to kind of hold still. You have to really wait for that right moment, and that kind of loses it in the camera for me. I need a camera to be fast, take the photo when I want it, and I want it to be good 9 out of 10 times. Samsung Galaxy S5 just unfortunately doesn't really do that. Now, it does have 4K video, and this is very nice, but again, it is a bit shaky. Now, we have the HTC One M8. It has a 4 ultra pixel camera. Now, I have no problem with a camera having 4 megapixels. I understand it is ultra pixels, but we're going to call it 4 megapixels because I don't really know what HTC is doing right here. Well, they could just slap their own basic camera on this phone. They went ahead and they're using their own 4 ultra pixels. Basically, you get decent photos. You can take a nice pic every once in a while. Low light is alright. If you can tell from the tone of my voice, the camera is meh. It's really nothing to call home about. It does have a nice feature called Duo Camera, which adds this second camera right up top, which basically calculates like depth and proximity. It allows you to get some pretty interesting effects with the software. Overall, though, it doesn't improve the quality of this camera, and I really wish HTC would just throw a normal camera on their phone. It would make it a lot better. Now, looking at the Galaxy Note 3, you have a 13 megapixel sensor. You're literally going to get the same quality you're getting from the S5. Very solid quality. And you are going to have to hold the phone a bit still. You don't have that optical image stabilization. But you do get 4K video, which is nice. But again, no stabilization for video. So now we have the iPhone. So this has an 8 megapixel camera. And despite the fact that this has the smallest megapixel count of all the phones mentioned, it is the king of mobile phone cameras. The shutter is fast, and 9 out of 10 times you are going to get the perfect shot. I don't care what you say, I don't care who you are, the iPhone has an incredible camera. It just works. Would I like to have a lot more available options for white balance, for exposure? Yes, of course I would. But this camera is great, hands down, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. Last up, we have the LG G2. This is a 13 megapixel shooter, and it's very similar to the quality you're getting on the Galaxy Note 3 as well as the Galaxy S5. So, good quality, like I said, similar to the S5 and Note 3. You do get optical image stabilization, which is really nice. This helps if you have a bit of a shaky hand. It can go ahead and stabilize the photos so you can get a little bit longer shutter release out of it. Now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at battery life on these 6 devices. So the LG G3 has a 3000 milliamp hour battery. After our testing, got about 12 to 13 hours, which is really nice. What you're going to have to take note of is the screen can be a total killer. So if you have a lot of screen on time, if you're watching movies, camera, whatever, it can definitely drain the battery down. The Galaxy S5 is pretty decent as well. At a 2800 mAh battery, got about 12 hours of solid use. Because it's an AMOLED display, it really does help the battery life if you have any black items on screen. Basically, the way AMOLED works is it only lights up pixels that have color. So if you're showing black, it's actually not going to light up the screen at all. So that's really nice and definitely helpful if you're trying to conserve some battery life. Now the HTC One M8 is decent as well. It has a 2600 mAh battery rather. I only got around 9 to 8 hours of battery life. Could be possible that I had a bad unit, but I mean overall I wasn't really complaining and it definitely lasted me through the day. Next up we have the Samsung Galaxy Note 3. Has a 3200 mAh battery, and this phone still stands as my favorite phone when it comes to battery. I can get a day and a half's worth of usage, 16 to 17 hours. I just love this battery. It kind of just keeps going. It's like it doesn't want to die. And it's definitely something I can attest to for the Galaxy Note 3. Next up, we have the iPhone, and I use the iPhone on a daily basis. This is my day-to-day phone. It has a 1570 mAh battery, and I've been getting around 7 to 8 hours of battery life, which is alright. I tend to keep my phone plugged in whenever I'm in the car, so on actual use, it's definitely getting longer than 7 to 8 hours, but if I'm away from a charger, if I'm going to the city or anything, 7 to 8 hours seems to be what I get. I definitely like a larger battery in the next phone. Last up, on the LG G3, it has a 3000 mAh battery. Got around 14 hours of battery life. This is definitely a very solid phone when it comes to battery life. So to wrap things up, on the LG G3, you have an amazing display, really great camera with the laser autofocus as well, and you have pretty significant battery life. Overall, I think the phone just has a really great looking design to it, and it definitely looks really nice in the hand. Looking at the Galaxy S5, it's really the iPhone of the Android world. It's a very well-rounded device, and you're going to get a lot of accessories for it, including all of the Galaxy gears. Also, it's IP67 certified, which is often overlooked, but that's a pretty major feature. You can go in water for a meter for 30 minutes, or it's fully dustproof. Now, the HTC One M8 is definitely one of the best built Android devices out there. The hardware is phenomenal, however the camera is beyond subpar. The OS looks really nice, and I really do like HTC Sense and what they're doing with that. Now the Galaxy Note 3 is really nice. It's definitely the most productive phone I feel like out of all these. S Pen definitely helps with that. And the camera is really nice. You're definitely not lacking on too many features, and the battery life is just insane. Now the iPhone is definitely the most popular device out there. And it's like that for a reason. The camera is amazing, hands down. It's a very simple device, but you're not going to get much customization options. Like I said, I'm personally an iPhone user, and I really love the accessory selection. So since you have so many iPhone users out there, the amount of cases and just everything that you can get for an iPhone is really great. And as stupid as that is, that's honestly a really big selling point for me. So if you're going with something like the iPhone 5S or the Galaxy S5, you do know that you're going to have a lot of third-party support as far as hardware goes. Last up, with the LG G2, it's definitely a decent phone. Unfortunately, it was really overlooked last year. The Galaxy S4 kind of shined right over it. It doesn't really do anything wrong, but it's just that there's a lot better choices out there, especially something like the LG G3. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video where we compared the LG G3 against the Galaxy S5, HTC One M8, Note 3, G2, and the iPhone 5S. If you guys enjoyed it, be sure to give us a huge thumbs up right down below. Let us know in the comments below which device you're going to be picking up, or if you have any of these devices right now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to check out all the new videos we're doing on the LG G3, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.